Hey everyone, you've joined me in mid-conversation. It's Joanne, Reid, and I. We're talking about mediocre white men and their fragility and how it has destroyed and is destroying America. And we have personal stories. The reason why I've invited Joy is first and foremost, any opportunity I can have talk to Joanne Reid is always welcome. And number two, she said yes, which is fantastic. And number three, it's because each and every single time we've had Joy on the left hook, we have MAGA combing through her every word, and a clip usually goes viral. And again, it's usually some mediocre MAGA man and their fragility that is offended by Joy's honesty and truthness and bluntness, and then they get really riled up. And so this time around, I'm like, you know what? Let's just give it to him straight. Give it to him hot on a platter.
Yes.
And I also want to give props to Joy, who put on some powder and blush and hoop earrings, and she's like, women got to do this, and meanwhile, I look like this. Um, I'm I'm traveling, folks. This is why I swear I'm blinking twice. I am safe. Um, but I can't. I'm supposed to be like chilling, but I can't. I can't chill.
Yeah.
But any opportunity I can have to take on these MAGA folks and then also connect the dots. Joy's also fantastic at actually connecting the dots and bringing the receipts. So the frame again is mediocre white men and their fragility and how it is destroying America. And we want to spill some tea. So yesterday, Danielle and I were talking about how Donald Trump has taken over the Kennedy Center honors. These people cannot create culture on their own. So
Right.
they need to take over, dominate, appropriate, and control. Without black people, brown people, the DEIs, there's no culture in America. We make the food better, we make the economy better, we make the music better, right? MAGA can't create culture. They got Cracker Barrel and Kid Rock. And we're talking about affirmative action for mediocre white men and how it's destroying America, right? Always goes back to the twin sins of white supremacy and greed. And I want to start with, I'm going to give I have a jukebox for Joy.
Yes.
We're going to first start with Scott Jennings of CNN. Joanne Reid.
Well, first of all, before we do this, thank you very much. And it's always great to be here with Watch, but I need you guys to give me a fashion consult. So I'm going to give you Wajahat, and I'm going to give your viewers here a choice, right? Because I had to also put on a hat. I just came from my hair salon, so I did get my hair done. But y'all tell me which hat. So I have this one, which I know will piss off the mediocrities, right? They get upset because they don't like history. So I'm wearing my 1619. My other option. Now, I have worn this in public and gotten a lot of compliments, mainly actually from white people who tend to enjoy it. So here's my other choice of hat, y'all. Which hat do you think?
S- Uh, ooh, let's do what they say.
Tough choice.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a tough choice.
This is nice too. Look at that. That's got with the stars. Uh, I love. I wonder, does it rhyme with Uncle Buck? Uncle Buck, Donald Stump. Uh, let's do
Maybe.
like Buck Donald Stump. Let's FDT seems to be the winner.
It's winning. Okay, I'm gonna keep this on.
Well,
All right,
yeah,
so
free
yes.
speech. Free
So what was your
speech.
question?
Yeah, free speech. Facts don't care about your feelings. No safe space.
Yeah.
Cruelty for us, civility for them, safe spaces for them, none for us. The question is, we're going to talk about how this is happening in real time and how this has always happened, how the fragility of a mediocre, terrified white men is destroying America, and how they have to make a level playing field for themselves. And it's all projection all the time. Like I just said right now, safe spaces for them, none for us.
Mhm.
Civility for them, cruelty for us. And we're seeing it in real time, folks. And I want to start with the media, for example,
Yeah.
Scott Jennings, because yesterday, yet again, a clip kind of went viral where Scott Jennings was just rude and disrespectful to liberal commentator Julie Rudzinski, who's been on the
Yes.
show a couple of times, and then you had another person who was just being belligerent, a woman whose name I'm forgetting, and like Mehdi and a few other people are like Abby Phillips, who is a black woman. Why do you allow this on your show? And what I said, having been a former employee at CNN, is Scott is doing his role. This is his job. This is why he got the fat contract.
Yeah.
He can sit there as a mediocre white man, as a mediocre conservative white man, and derail an entire show, disrespect everyone, be completely ignorant, be completely counterfactual, and he will be rewarded. But Joanne Reid talks about Gaza, and she's on Substack with me.
Exactly. 100%. And I mean, and his purpose there. And here's what the lady was trying to say to him, which he got. And look, the tell is how offended he gets whenever anyone uses the phrase January 6th. It's when he completely loses it because the act that he's doing, the sort of false pretense of being MAGA, which a lot of them do. This guy used to work for George W. Bush.
Yep.
He is not MAGA. And I hope this is the clip that goes viral. Scott Jennings is cosplaying as MAGA, just like Senator John Cornyn and Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham and Marco Rubio. They're pretending to be MAGA because they see an immediate financial, political benefit for themselves. And they're jumping on the train, but they hate the person that they worship. And what she was trying to bring up, and I just Googled it real quick to bring it up, and this is what he doesn't want y'all to remember. Scott Jennings, after the January 6th insurrection, wrote a piece. He wrote one for the LA Times, which they've taken down, which is weird, right? Because they're friends with MAGA. But he wrote one for CNN in which it was titled, "Trump caused this insurrection and every Republican must condemn it." And he starts by saying, this is literally an insurrection. That's not me. That's the first line. This is literally an insurrection. The fact that the U.S. military hasn't secured the seat of our government already is a failure of leadership by the commander-in-chief. He goes on to call these people terrorists. He goes in. Y'all, I'm going to put this on my Substack. You should put it on yours, Wajahat, because when I tell you Scott Jennings went off on the insurrectionists, and he is desperate for the MAGA base to forget that so he can run for office and get patted on the head by Trump. He has no original thoughts. He just derails the conversation when he knows he's about to get called out to stop the other people on the panel from reminding Donald Trump who he is. It's just like J.D. Vance, who said Trump might be Hitler, but now it's like, no, 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 Trump is my boss. The plane. Totally different guy.
And it's the reason why they're derailing it is because they can't escape from the fact that Donald Trump is a criminal, uh, was a molester of women who incited a violent insurrection and who pardoned all of them, the 1,600 insurrectionists, including those violent insurrectionists with a violent track record, who beat up cops, who shit in the U.S. Capitol, some of them who came with weapons to try to assassinate Nancy Pelosi, and then also Mike Pence, who was thrown to the wolves. And as they're being tough on crime and unleashing the National Guard in the nation's capital and in LA right now, this man has given a cushy sweetheart deal that has been unseen and unheard since, 2008, since the last cushy deal that Alex Acosta gave to Jeffrey Epstein. And they're straight up pro-pedophile because Ghislaine Maxwell is a pedophile who grooms women and abuses these women. So they're simultaneously trying to distract, and at the same time, it's projection, and at the same time, it's a power grab. And we have to remind everyone that Scott Jennings started off as a never Trumper, moderate Republican. He wanted restoration, but he saw where the bread was being buttered. And now all of a sudden, he's become a full-on Trumper, and he hates his bona fides as a rhino coming out. Because if they came out, it would probably, like you said, derail his senatorial ambitions because he wants to take over his Palpatine mentor's position as senator in Kentucky. I also yesterday when I was talking to my co-host Danielle, I gave a story of CNN where when I was there for a year, and for those who saw us at the beginning, Joy and I were trading receipts about how we got written up.
Our HR files.
Our HR files. I got 4 phone calls or 3.5 phone calls. And the only reason I got phone calls by Rebecca Cutler, who's now running MSNBC.
Who was the one who fired me.
Yeah, and I've never been invited back to CNN or MSNBC, and I don't think I will because Rebecca, I don't think likes it when people tattletale. I don't care. I'll spill the tea. Is I was on with Scott Jennings. It was Anderson Cooper. We're doing a debate. Same Scott Jennings who derails conversations. All right.
Yeah.
We go back and forth, and man, he didn't like me. I always brought my receipts. And I finally looked at Scott, and I said exactly what Joy said. I said, Scott, you should, of all people, should know better. You're the man who said Trump was terrible. You're the man who knows about the Republican Party. Good Lord, man, stop being an amoeba. Have a spine. Be a man. Have a spine. And stand up to these people. The next day in the morning, I got a phone call from Rebecca Cutler. Hey, we have to be more civil. And Scott didn't really appreciate what you said yesterday. And I sat there, I'm like, I've been called so many different things. I get trolled. I get hated on. I never once, Joy, picked up the phone and ratted out on Rebecca Cutler, right? 3.5 phone calls, each 4. That's the reason why I say half is another reason for, if you all remember me and Rick Wilson in the Ukraine segment on Don Lemon, which, by the way, CNN loved initially, put the entire clip on the homepage of CNN. The right wing then complained about it. Then 2 days later, they bend the knee to bad faith right wing outrage, and Don Lemon has to apologize, and me and Rick get thrown under the bus. So each and every single time I got written up was because conservatives and right wing white men were offended after I destroyed them live on television using facts. Joy, I give
Yeah,
to
I
you.
mean, and it's absolutely true. And it's because they don't have the intellectual rigor to actually argue or debate with us, right? And what they do is they tattle and tell. They run and tell teacher that the black man, the black lady, or the brown man was mean to me. And that's what they always do. They have no courage. Their little shells are so soft. And they're the ones who claim facts don't care about your feelings and want to be able to say the M word, say all kind of negative things about Muslims, say all kind of negative things about women, do whatever they want. But if you push back, then they whine and bitch and cry. I can tell you my HR file contained 3 complaints that the only thing I knew that the HR person would tell me about the complainers is that they were white male colleagues who would not use their names. White men are the most powerful people in the media. They occupy the top spots. They occupy the C-suite. They run every single media company. They are all the CEOs. They are, well, almost all the CEOs, and they are all the billionaires that run
Yep.
everything. But they didn't have the courage to tell give their name because they're mad at the black lady. Why were they mad at the little black lady? Because I had done segments about Christian nationalism, white Christian nationalism, because that's what it is called. And when I did the segments on white Christian nationalism, these men told on me, ran to teacher and said I was being anti-Christian. Now, let me start with the fact that I am a Christian and I grew up in the church, used to be a Sunday school teacher. So I'm like, kind of hard to be anti-Christian. And here are the guests who I had on when I talked about white Christian nationalism. Robert P. Jones, who is himself a white man and an evangelical Christian who runs the Public Religion Research Institute. Frank Schaeffer, whose father founded white Christian nationalism. Okay. And Bishop Barber, who's an actual bishop. So whenever I would talk about white Christian nationalism, I would have on experts in that field. So I'm not just going on and screaming, I hate white Christians. That's just not something I ever did. We did factual segments about the dangers of white Christian nationalism, which we now see playing out. Because who wrote Project 2025?
Yep, a
White
lot.
Christian nationalists. The Esther Project, which they're now going to use to silence any anti-Palestinian, any pro-Palestinian dissent, pro-Palestinian protest. That's written by the same people who wrote Project 2025, white Christian nationalists who are trying to incarcerate women and turn women into breed mules, white Christian nationalists. Who is really threatening Donald Trump, threatening to make Donald Trump a dictator? Who's on the Supreme Court saying essentially we're going to eviscerate the Constitution? White Christian nationalists, plus Clarence Thomas, who's like whatever their pet or something.
Oh, you, you went there, but I will
I mean, we don't
co-sign.
claim him, so I can talk bad
Yeah.
about him because we put him
Oh,
out.
in the
Like,
racial
Atlantic put
draft,
him out.
in
We
in the
took him
racial
out.
draft, Joyanne Reed has officially cut Clarence Thomas and warned everyone not to pick him up off of waivers. We also have cut Kash Patel and Nimrata, and we've told everyone please do not pick him up off of waivers. But speaking about the mediocrity, the
And
cruelty, the
you should take out Usha Vance. I don't think Usha Vance should get to come to y'all barbecues.
oh no, no, Usha is utterly complicit. JD Vance and Usha right now are having yet another vacation, this time in a massive Scottish mansion, as one does, because his only job is to stay alive and wait for McCankle's Donald Trump to die. That's literally it. That's the only purpose of JD Vance is Peter Thiel and the Broligarchy, these other fragile white men,
Yes.
who, by the way, are so upset. Peter Thiel, I mean, you could literally make a through line, folks. Peter Thiel, so upset that Gawker outed him that he used another fragile white man, a racist white man, Hulk Hogan, to
Yep.
completely destroy Gawker, right? They can dish it, but they can't take it, right? Elon Musk, so radicalized, right? Because Obama and Biden didn't give him that proper lift, that he now then gave $300 million to Donald Trump, a fascist, right? I just read David Mamet said that he went right wing because Terry Gross. Did you hear this? The reason why David Mamet went right wing and nutty and cruel over the past 20 years, because Terry Gross didn't invite me on NPR. It's
Come
the
on.
same. It's the same, folks. And speaking about The fragility, the mediocrity, how the world's worst fail up, the double standards where you get penalized for bringing on guests talking about Gaza, how we every single comment by AOC, Rashida Tlaib gets combed. Muslims. If a Muslim extremist does something, Zoran Mamdani has to like condemn it and also condemn chants that he hasn't used. But Pete Hegseth, another mediocre white, sorry, Pete Hegseth, who's the Secretary of Defense, and folks, I bring the receipts. His predecessor, Lloyd Austin, black man, had to be a four-star general, had to be perfect throughout his entire life, had an O10 rank. Pete Hegseth, O4 rank, not a general, Fox News host, record of alcoholism, record of abusing women, has signed an NDA with a woman who accused him of sexual abuse. Pete Hegseth, who went to Princeton and wrote, foreshadowing that if you have sex with a woman who's drunk and passed out, it doesn't count as rape. That Pete Hegseth, just a few days ago, retweeted a CNN segment where I'm forgetting that Pamela, I think that was her, who went and interviewed Doug. Did you see this? Speaking about white Christian nationalists, she interviewed. So you all should see the segment. She interviewed this pastor.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, the pastor's Doug Wilson. Doug Wilson is a pastor, and one of his congregants is Pete Hegseth.
Mhm.
Doug Wilson describes himself as a paleo Confederate. He believes that Southern slavery was wrong, but that the Confederacy, Joanne, was otherwise, quote, right on all the essential constitutional and cultural issues surrounding the war. Hegseth belongs to his denomination. He has also referred to women he doesn't like as, quote, small-breasted biddies, lumberjack dykes. He said the sexual act cannot be made into an egalitarian pleasuring party. A man penetrates, conquers, colonizes, plants. A woman receives, surrenders, accepts. End quote. He also says one of the reasons why we have such problems with assimilating Muslims and Hindus is that there are so many of them. Also, not a fan of the 19th Amendment. With that freaking insane CNN clip, that whole segment, the person who retweeted it positively and has not been asked about it to this day was Pete Hegseth. Sorry for that rant. Joy.
Well, no, and the bottom line is if a black man had the exact same credentials and was even considered by a Democratic president to be Secretary of Defense, they would be screaming DEI, which is a thing they invented into or flipped into a new racial slur because it's just their version of the N word, right? They don't think that Brandon Scott is qualified to be the mayor of Baltimore. They don't think that Wes Moore, who is a decorated military veteran, is qualified to be the governor of Maryland. They don't think any woman is qualified to be in any level of authority in the United States military. They think they should go home and make sandwiches for them. They again called Lloyd Austin a DEI hire, a four-star general, and then
Yeah.
tried to essentially get him fired because he had the nerve to get cancer. And didn't mention it, and he should have mentioned that he was ill, but he literally came back from surgery within a week and went right back to work. And because he, in that 4 days that he was out of office, didn't completely throw himself on the mercy of the press corps, the useless press corps in many ways that doesn't ask any questions, he should be ridden out on a rail. But Pete Hegseth, who nobody can credibly say is qualified for his job, gets to run the entire Defense Department while promoting both white nationalism, essentially erasing any person of color, gay person, or woman from United States history. You can't have a ship named after Medgar Evers or Harvey Milk, but you can try to rename every single formerly Confederate named military base after the Confederates, but he doesn't even have the courage to break the law, which under under Lloyd Austin's tenure, they banned naming this stuff after Confederates. And then there was a law that was passed that said you can't do it. So what Pete Hegseth is spending his time doing when he's not blackout drunk is Googling the names of similarly named white men from
Yep.
history whose names are similar to Confederate names, and then putting those names, random soldiers who have the same names as Confederates, because he's so desperate to have back Robert E. Lee, being venerated in the military and other Confederates who were traitors to the country. And if you think about to your original point, Wajahat, about the mediocrity, and this I call one name for what we have is a mediocrity. They're deliberately finding completely unqualified people whose only virtue apparently is that they are white and that Donald Trump likes seeing them on TV. Jeanine Pirro being the U.S. attorney from D.C. is a joke. It is hilarious. It would be funny if it weren't so dangerous. Pam Bondi, who did literally nothing when she was in tenure in Florida, when Jeffrey Epstein got that sweetheart deal, she then had like 8 years to try to pursue Ghislaine Maxwell, to pursue justice for those victims. She did absolutely nothing. She's a Barbie doll that goes on Fox. So now she gets to be the attorney general. Go RFK Jr., who has literally no qualifications other than being a kook and a conspiracy theorist to run our whole health system alongside Dr. Oz. No qualifications whatsoever. Trump likes him on TV. They're literally almost laughing in our face and saying, how do we find the most unqualified people in the world and put them in these positions to make these positions a joke? And when the person isn't a white male, they're almost even more crazily unqualified. Kristi Noem, who was banned from a quarter of her state by the Native American tribes because she was so offensive, gets to be, I guess she's kind of Homeland Security Secretary, but she really rides horses and runs around cosplaying in front of brown people being thrown on the ground. And you can go back to your friend Kash Patel, who I know is sad. He wakes up every morning, just like Clarence Thomas is sad they don't wake up every morning as an Anglo-American male. But you don't, Kash. Kash Patel looks like a deer in the headlights every day, like he don't even know where he is. He went from saying, why can't the FBI director release the Epstein files? They're the one who has control of it, to being the FBI director who apparently cannot release the Epstein files. It's a joke. It's a cartoon. Thank God for South Park showing it the way it is.
That's a fantastic rant. Joanne said, "I take your rant and I'll ante it up." Cash Patel. No matter how many young blonde white women you take to bed, you'll never be blonde and you'll never be white, and they'll never love you. Never ever,
Never.
never ever,
Ever. Or
ever.
Rubio. Somebody put Rubio in the chat, y'all. We forgot about Marco Rubio. I used to cover Marco Rubio back in Florida. Poor Marco Rubio. He's been everything. He's been a Tea Partier. He's been a Bush Republican. He's like Scott Jennings. He's basically the Latino Scott Jennings. His grandfather stayed over his visa and was essentially an undocumented immigrant. And now he's like, the undocumented gotta go. He's literally, you can see in his face that his soul has flown from his body. And he is so soulless because he still has the delusion of believing he's going to one day be president if he just holds on to Donald Trump's ankles, his big, fat, puffed up ankles, hard enough that he will be able to be president somewhere down the road. It's pathetic. He's pathetic.
And let me repeat, never ever, little Marco, never ever. This is about as
Ever.
close as you get. And it all is connected, folks, right? It's all connected. The rage, the fragility, the racism, the misogyny, right? I'm so glad that Joy talked about white Christian nationalism. Again, I'm reading the CNN article where Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, he praised this right-wing Christian pastor. His words, he calls himself a paleo Confederate pastor. Out in the open, the entire CNN segment, it's all there with Pamela Brown. Go check it out. And Pete Hegseth, our Secretary of Defense, who is completely unqualified for his job, who, by the way, there's leaks after leak after leak coming from inside the White House because people are turning on him, right? The military is like, the morale is at an all-time low, right? His entire job is to scrub qualified people from their positions and replace them with other mediocre whites. His entire position is to eliminate DEI, right? Get rid of all these books written by people of color and women. But guess what, folks? The only book that's still there is
Hmm.
Mein Kampf. Mein Kampf is still there. Remember that? Uh,
Yeah.
he literally, I just want to say this again. White Christian nationalism. Pete Hegseth made plain this month when he posted his support for Wilson after Wilson reiterated on CNN his support for Christian nationalism. The words Hegseth used, quote, all of Christ for all of life are a common saying in the communion of Reformed evangelical churches. It's out in the open. No one calls him out for it. And speaking about white Christian nationalism, white Christian nationalism had a footprint on January 6th. Oh, that day of a violent insurrection. And on that day, there was an individual participating in the violent insurrection. Do you know who one of those people were, Joanne? E.J. Antoni. E.J. Antoni, speaking about mediocre white men falling up, is now going to replace an extremely accomplished woman who is a doctor, who is the commissioner of Bureau of Labor Statistics. He has now been chosen by Donald Trump to replace her despite having any experience in that job because he will tell Donald Trump the good numbers, the numbers that make him happy. Because, folks, if you haven't paid attention, the economy, no bueno. The job report numbers came out based on hardcore statistics, and they had to do a massive revision, and they showed limited job growth, especially in the private sector. The stock market responded and had its worst week since 2020. What was happening in 2020? A pandemic. Who was president? Donald Trump. And so Donald Trump came out with evidence and said it's rigged. It's rigged. The lady who was running it, she was a Biden appointee and she lied. And so now I'm going to put
Good
in
impression.
EJ. I'm going to put in EJ Antoni. EJ Antoni's going to come in. He's a great guy. And just connecting the dots, folks. Completely unqualified, thoroughly mediocre, hates the this organization that he's now going to run, is only going to share the numbers that Donald Trump likes because Donald Trump doesn't like facts that hurt his feelings. And I don't know if you saw this, Joy, because of course it always connects. In addition to being there on January 6th, we literally have a photo of him there with the insurrectionists. He's also a history buff,
Mm.
and he has a giant picture of Hitler's favorite ship behind him when he does his Zoom meetings. Just randomly, who doesn't have a giant picture
Who among
of
us?
Hitler's favorite ship when we do Zooms? Joy.
I mean, behind me, if you can see it, I'll tilt my camera up. I have a giant picture as well, but they won't be happy to know it's a black person. So, son of a
DEI.
MAGA.
DEI. We got to replace it with a
D
Confederate
my
soldier.
DEI photo back there. But, here's the thing. It all fits, right? They scream, Piers Morgan, when I went on that fool's, show, started off well, first of all, he started off by saying, "You blocked me on Twitter." And I was like, what?" "You blocked me on Twitter." And I said, I haven't been on Twitter for, like, years." "When it was before Elon." I was like, "Oh, that's weird. You're obsessed with that? That's cool." Um, but then his next question was about, "Why do you call Donald Trump Hitler? Why do you say he's a Nazi?" And I said, "Well, I never said he was Hitler. I never said he was Nazi. His vice president said he was Hitler, and then he might be Hitler. And he talks like a Nazi. He keeps saying things like poisoning the blood of our people. He
Yep.
keeps using Nazi language. And his own former chief of staff and his own former joint chiefs here said he's a fascist to the core. I'm quoting them. And so, but there is this obsession on the right with trying to restore a world in which they could behave like a Nazi, but no one would say anything because there weren't enough brown and black people in public spaces who could ever call them out, because you can get away with being mediocre when you actually don't have to compete. And I'll just very quickly say, when this country began, the whole idea of what America was this every man a king notion, that any white man who came to this country with just the sweat of his brow and belief in himself could essentially operate like a king without the actual king of England interfering or taxing him or telling him what to do. That each person could be a kingdom, and every white man in his kingdom were the women who were effectively property, the slaves who were literally property, and the indigenous who you could just take their land the same way that the land's being taken from the Palestinians, which is why I think some of these Americans love it, without them having to have any permission or any consent, right? The notion you could take whatever land you want, take whatever you want, tell your women what to do, treat them like property, treat blacks like property. This world worked really well for white men because even if they were poor, they understood that they had unlimited rights and that even if they had nothing economically, they could kill literally any black man they wanted, and they could actually exercise their anger and their rage and their discontent by harming people of color because it was effectively legal to kill them. And so what you had were two kinds of white men. You had white men at the top who had the education, the money, the opportunity with no competition. There was never going to be a black person going for the same job. They weren't allowed. There was never going to be a black person running against you for office. They weren't allowed. You had full freedom. And then you had the broke white people who didn't have anything economically, but when they really got discontented, they could just kill Emmett Till and let off their feelings that way. That was literally the system in the United States. And so what you have now are white men, to be blunt, who are raging against the change that was the 20th century, that said, you know what? women also get to vote. It's not just y'all. You know what? Black people can actually live where they want. They don't have to live in these segregated ghettos. They can live next to you. They can buy a house next to yours. They can buy your house. Women also get to be freed from your kitchen. White women can actually go to work like brown and black women always had. Asian men who were barred from even immigrating and when they came to work weren't allowed to bring their wives or have children here because they think were too many Asians. All of a sudden, the 20th century said, there is no unlimited kingdom for white men. They don't get to be a king. You actually just have to be a citizen. And now you have to be leveled out and compete with all the other Americans who are not white men. Now, about 40% of white men said, bet, cool, I can live with that. Let's get it. Let's do it. Let's get in the culture. I like Mexican food. I like Asian food. I like me to eat some Indian food. I want to go be in the barbecue and I want to be at the cookout. Let's do it. And about 60% said, hell no, never. And
And
those 60% are who we are still dealing with right now.
yeah,
And it is the reason we are where we are. They would rather have literal fascism and a literal dictatorship than have to compete on an even keel with people who look like you, me, or any white woman.
and it's always been this way, folks. And for those who are in the comment section, I appreciate you appreciating Joy's rant. We just try to connect the dots. And what we said before on the show, and we'll say it again, and I've held strongly to this, is the two original sins of America that have unfortunately never been confronted and completely eradicated are white supremacy and capitalism. To put in
Yes.
simple terms, racism and greed. And
Mhm.
until those two sins are eradicated, we will have a country that destroys itself. Case in point, Donald Trump is the cankled avatar of both capitalism and white supremacy. And it's always been this way. Each and every single time this country has a chance to evolve, to expand, to stretch, to actually live out its professed ideals. As the great professor Carol Anderson of Emory in her book White Rage wrote, right?
Mhm.
Every single time there's a step towards progress, equality, right? Hey, maybe black people shouldn't be, I don't know, hung for like surviving. Maybe, Latinos can actually get paid equally. Maybe women can leave the kitchen. Maybe Muslims can come to this country. White rage puts us in a chokehold and tries to take us two steps back. And it always goes back. Joe, I used to say they want to take us back to 1952, pre-Brown versus Board of Education. They wanted to take it back to segregation. But then I edited it a couple of years ago, and I said they actually want to take us back to 1852.
Yeah.
Civil War, where the white man could do with the black and brown body what he chose, what the white man could do with the woman what he chose to do, right? Where nobody would check them. And you see this grievance, this rage, this anger, right? The wokeness, just because they can't use the N word anymore and they feel like it's the greatest injustice, right? And you saw some of these MAGA bro comedians saying, we could say the R word again, and we could say the F word again. That's the win. Congratulations. You have fascism now because you can like destroy trans people and, mentally challenged people. And that's the win. I'm not making it up, folks. Go look at the
Yeah.
brosphere Joe Rogan comedians. That was their win. That you can say the R word. And by the way, folks, all of that is an amuse bouche because what they really want to say is the N word with
Yeah.
the hard R. And again, connecting the dots, Pete Hegseth's pastor, whom he praised, refers to himself as a Paleo Confederate.
Mhm.
Paleo Confederate. It all goes back to the Civil War, folks. White men who used to enslave black people feel like they were the victims as a result of slavery ending, as a result of Reconstruction. They had to create a myth. They had to create a romanticized, delusional story of the lost cause. Since the 19th century, they have brought up, if you will, reboots of the same story. It's the same story, it's just reboots. And I always want, I know you know this movie, but I always give, for those who don't know this example, if an alien came to America and said, give me 5 movies that explain this country, the movie, for sure, the top 5, maybe even the top 3, would be Birth of a Nation.
Mhm.
Birth of a Nation is a movie that came out in 1915 uh, by D.W. Griffith, who was based on the writings of Thomas Dixon, who was a white supremacist, but never referred to himself as a white supremacist, referred to himself as just the defender of the white man. And this movie, folks, it's a remarkable movie. This movie was the avatar of its day. This movie was the Avatar, Gone with the Wind, Lord of the Rings of its day combined. Woodrow Wilson, the President of the United States of America, loved this movie. It was screened in the White House. This movie shows what happened during Reconstruction, right? And it shows the poor white man. He can no longer be in Congress. It's these unruly blacks who take over Congress. Or I'm not making this up. They're
Mm-hmm.
eating fried chicken in the congressional halls. They take off their boots. It's so disgusting. You got white men in black paint. And guess what the black people wanted once they got the power? They weren't done. They wanted the white woman.
White women. Yeah.
And they looked up at there's this amazing scene. The editing, this is the thing, the editing is brilliant, the directing is brilliant, but shit, it's a white supremacist tone. They look up in unison at the white woman and they start grinning and saliva starts coming out. And the white man tries to protect the white woman. And so the white man, to defend his legacy and his honor, and the white woman, and to restore America and make America great again, the white man has to wear the hood and
Mm-hmm.
don the cloth and come on the horse. And folks, it celebrates the KKK. And because of that movie, because of culture, because of propaganda, the KKK rose back from the dead and started terrorizing black folks again. This was the movie, folks. I just want to remind people it's a reboot every few years, and Donald Trump is the manifestation of this. Pete Hegseth, January 6th insurrection, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of these independent people, racist to their core. Speaking about Nazis, sorry, this goes back and forth. Joy says stuff that inspires me, then I rant, and then I give it back to Joy, and she's more smart than me, and then it inspires me to go on a muddled rant. But I want to remind people that four-star General Kelly in the first Trump administration, who was initially, if I recall, DHS secretary and then became his chief of staff,
Right.
he's the one that said Donald Trump praised Hitler.
Yeah.
Donald Trump has quoted Hitler. Donald Trump, folks, a receipt I always try to bring, Danny, Joy, and now I'm saying it again because I've been trying to warn people since October.
Mm-hmm.
He said, quoting Hitler, I'm going to unleash the National Guard and the military against the, quote, enemy from within. And Joy, what is happening right now in DC and in LA? He is unleashing
100%.
the military, right? And then also, speaking about the mediocrity, they cannot win without cheating. Texas, the
Yes.
racism in Texas. So, sorry for my rant. I yield authority.
No, it's a good one. It's a good one. And I like the dots you're connecting because very quickly to ping off what you're saying, that what you just described, Waj, is the whole reason whiteness was invented. You have to remember that whiteness is an invention of slaveholders who needed to figure out a way to justify enslaving an entire race of people and also getting the other group of people they were indenturing, the Irish indentured, mainly Irish indentured, who are effectively slaves too, to not join with the black enslaved people and rebel and kill them. And
Mm,
they're like, the way that we get the white indentured to not side with either the indigenous people of this country or the enslaved people is to create a difference that is more valuable than even money. And it's called whiteness.
yep.
Whiteness was invented in the 16th century by these enslavers to say, hey, white man, you may be a little bit above a slave, but that whiteness, that class of being white, which isn't a real human thing. We're all just Homo sapiens, other than the people who have a little got a little Neanderthal in there, but most of us are just Homo sapiens. But they said, no, 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 no. White is a thing that's real, and it is actually the most powerful invention, I would argue, ever created.
Wow.
The Klan, as you talked about it, was actually invented to terrorize black men who were trying to vote.
Mm, mm,
And that film, by reinvigorating the Klan, which was again, it's all connected. When the Civil War ends and the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, which this Supreme Court is trying to remove, they're trying to basically dead the 14th Amendment, especially with this birthright citizenship. The only reason black people are citizens in the country is it said so in the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. Before that, blacks weren't citizens because, again, that whiteness carried with it literal citizenship. All your rights came with that white card. And this
yep.
is one of the reasons, by the way, that so many Latinos are anti-black. Because even though by the one drop rule, they're all black, because just by the rules of white people. they have that one drop, right? That's why they the little swarthy. They got a little bit of, little bit of sauce in them. But a lot of them have African ancestry, but they deny it and they try to whiten themselves, right? The blanquimiente, I think they call it. Blanquimiento, I think is the name of it. And because they're trying to aspire to that card, that white card has more power than money in
Yeah.
America.
Yeah.
Right. And even there are some immigrants who are themselves Black people. I mean, or Candace Owens, Black people who want that card, who Clarence Thomas, who cling to that card. Okay. So what you're saying is absolutely true. But the purpose of the Klan was to stop Black people from voting, because when Black people voted, they did get in Congress. Louisiana, which had a majority Black population because of slavery, was sending Black United States senators to Washington. Mississippi, that had a majority Black population because of slavery, had statewide Black elected officials. The lieutenant governor was Black. And so what happened was, when you had open multiracial democracy, Black people were able to elect not just Black people, but liberal whites, which used to be called Republicans. And so the fear of the economic elite is always that the non-elite will all get together and French Revolution they ass. And the easiest way to keep white people out of the fight against capitalism is to make white people side with the elite based on that card. And so
Yep.
the trick really, they think it's a trick on you and me. The trick is on white people, because
Always.
what they're doing is they're saying, I would rather Donald Trump be a billionaire than I be able to pay my rent and eat, because that card is more valuable to me than my rent. It's more valuable to me than anything. And then the last piece I'll put of it, to get back to your mediocrity thing, Donald Trump, in some ways, people try to say God put him in the White House. I don't believe God is that cruel. But in a way, I'm thinking the way you could justify saying that, Donald Trump is the physical embodiment of all of America's sins.
Yeah,
He's
I agree
sloppy,
completely.
right? He's sloppy. He's unkempt. Everything about him is false. His hair is a pretense of non-baldness. He's old, but his followers try to pretend that he looks like Superman. He's a terrible businessman and a failure who gets to fake success because he's white, so banks keep lending him money even when he's failing. His father scoops money out of his siblings' inheritance to give him when he fails. He's a fuck up, but he's able to be a success because white America keeps saying, no, 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 that guy is what success looks like. He's only a success on that TV show because when he was at his brokest, he gets hired to be on The Apprentice. His boardroom couldn't even be used on The Apprentice. And I found
Right.
this out in my first, my Trump book, because it was so shoddy and unkempt. I went in Trump Tower in the 80s. It was tacky and sad. His marriage is a fraud. Melania clearly won't even touch him. The last time she let him touch her, they had Barron. Clear that he ain't touching her now. He doesn't believe in marriage. He doesn't have morality. He got 3 baby mamas, 5 children. Everything about him is a lie. He's not a Christian, but Christians love him. But he embodies the greed, the shamelessness, the lasciviousness of capitalism. And now also, to your main and I think really important point, the mediocrity. He could never be JFK. He's
Nope.
not handsome. He's not suave. He's not brave. He was never a war hero like JFK. He has none. Even RFK can never be JFK. None of these people stand up to JFK's legacy. But he can only get a theater named after him by stealing JFK's. Melania can only get a ballroom, the Kit Kat Club lady he met at the Kit Kat Club. We don't know who introduced him, but Jeffrey Epstein was around. She can only get a ballroom named after her by being married to Donald Trump. Donald Trump, he said himself, he could never get a Kennedy Center honor. Unworthy. But he can get one now. He can steal one because he owns a Kennedy Center. They can't fix the history they did. Their ancestors made this country into a slave hell. But they can clean it up now because they got the Smithsonian. They can get rid of all the slavery stuff. They got PragerU. They can lie about the history to the children. They can't originally invent anything more than they ever were able to invent good music. We Black folk gave y'all country music, hip hop, R&B, jazz, rock and roll. They couldn't even invent that, but they have to call a white man the king, because they couldn't make rock and roll. So they have to stamp the king on a man whose main song was stolen from an overweight Black woman. You ain't nothing but a hound dog. Think about the lyrics. Why would a man You ain't nothing but a hound dog, lying all the time. That's a song a woman sings about a man. He stole that song and made it a hit because he couldn't invent rock and roll. Even the Beatles knew that. They were like, we didn't invent this shit. We're singing black people's music. The Stones admitted it. So my whole thing is, when you invent a country where you don't tell white people that they need to innovate. Even Elon Musk didn't invent them damn Teslas. 2 other men invented it. He just bought it. And so when you tell them you don't have to be excellent, you just have to be white, you will get mediocrity. You will get mediocrity because they're not asking white people to be great. They're not asking them to be great. They're telling them you can be the opposite of great and be defense secretary. You can be the opposite of great and be Homeland Security Secretary. They're telling white people a lie so that they will believe that they have achieved when all they're doing is thieving greatness from other people. And I actually think that is a shame for white America. Because if you raised your kids that way, you would get brats, you would get monsters, you would get demons you don't even want at Thanksgiving. But we're raising an America that is mediocre on purpose because we don't want to tell Donald Trump that he is a fucking failure. But he is.
You all just got taken to church by Sunday school teacher Joanne Reid. When someone drops it like it's hot, you know when to just sit back and let her cook. That was brilliant. I'll simply repeat a quote, a famous quote by a white man, by a white president during the 1960s, Lyndon B. Johnson. Quote: "If you can convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you're picking his pocket. Hell, give him somebody to look down on, and he'll empty his pockets for you. Same as it ever was. The twisted, sordid, destructive marriage between white supremacy and capitalism, racism and greed, the twin sins of America manifesting itself in its avatar, Donald Trump. I have referred to him as America's Pharaoh, but he is perhaps just America's sins. Perhaps he is America, folks, and people might not like recognize him. When Joe Biden says, this isn't who we are, and the rest of us, especially people of color are like, I think it is.
That is.
Yeah. They're like, we're not like this. Like, it can't happen. We've been trying to. Folks, it ultimately, at the end of the day, until we confront it and uproot it, name it, shame it, understand it, until you get, wait for it, woke, we will be suffering this again and again and again. Of course, we had Barack Obama after the failure of George W. Bush. And of course, in this country, we would get Donald Trump after the first black president, right? This is America. And of course, this Donald Trump, who has created no culture, but just steals, will take over the Kennedy Center and give it to Sylvester Stallone, who, by the way, became famous because Rocky is all about a white man, a mediocre white man who has no chance in hell ever, 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 ever beating Apollo Creed. Sylvester Stallone said, "Well, I wouldn't, I got to make sure that at least in fiction, a white man like me can beat Muhammad Ali." That's what it was based upon, folks. Apollo Creed was based upon Muhammad Ali, a smooth-talking, witty, fast-talking black man who beat up white folks, and they had to put that black man in his place. So Sylvester Stallone, all 5'6" of him, goes up against Apollo Creed, Carl Weathers, and now you have a statue, not of like actual boxers like Joe Louis in Philadelphia. You have a statue in Philadelphia of freaking Rocky Balboa, a fictional creation of Hollywood. Another fictional creation of Hollywood, John Wayne. He did not exist. It is a creation. John Wayne was an athlete who got injured and he was surfing and then he just stumbled on and became a Hollywood creation. And people are like, why can't we have men like John Wayne and Gary Cooper?
And that wasn't his name, right? Wasn't his name Marion something? What was his name? Marion.
Yeah,
Marion.
well, Ronald Reagan, actor. Donald Trump, actor. It's all fiction. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's all a myth. That's what white supremacy is, because that's what it needs to sustain itself and its delusions of superiority. And they do it by taking our culture, our contributions, our wealth, our narratives, our talent, and then stealing it. Stealing it if they can't copy it. And I give you Donald Trump, an actor, a man who's a bankrupt, criminal who incited a violent insurrection. He bankrupted casinos. He squandered his daddy's wealth. And somehow he has failed up in life thanks to whiteness, wealth, and celebrity. It's all there in front of you. I hope we connected the dots. I hope we pissed off all the right people. Joyanne Reid, a pleasure always. You were cooking today, sister. I mean,
You
you were
too.
on.
We
You
were
were always
you
on, but today
too.
was something special.
Right back at you. And I will close with my phrase that I close. I try to close it every day, at least once a day, somewhere on some kind of camera. Release the Epstein files.
Epstein files. Epstein files. And folks, I'm gonna let Joy go. I kept her 7 minutes longer than I wanted to, but I will say this: there's two weaknesses of Donald Trump, the two E's: Epstein and the economy. All right. So anyone who tells you Epstein isn't a big deal, just ignore them. Ignore them completely. They're terrible at politics, but not just politics. I want to say this because sometimes this gets lost. Joy, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and their friends, rich, powerful white men, raped girls. They
Yeah,
raped girls, hundreds of girls. I didn't say women, I'm saying
yeah,
girls. And those girls deserve justice. So never forget that these powerful men, thanks to wealth and whiteness, were able to rape girls in front of our face and escape justice. And it's happening in real time. And Donald Trump is all over them files, folks. Release the Epstein files. It's the one kryptonite of Donald Trump. The second kryptonite is the economy.
yeah.
That's why they're freaking out. And those cankles, white supremacy ultimately might I don't know if those cankles can support it, folks. Joy, thank you so much. Before I let you go, shamelessly promote yourself. How can people support you? How can people find you?
Absolutely. Two ways to do that. You can subscribe to my Substack, which is called Joy's House. It's at joyandreid.com, REID. And you can also subscribe, and I hope you will, to The Joy Reid Show. We do Monday, Wednesday, and Friday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the YouTube. So you can subscribe to the YouTube channel for free at thejoyreidshow.com.
That is awesome. And folks, in about 5 minutes, I'm going to have Katie Fang, uh, Joy and Katie back to back. So come back in about 5 minutes, and we're going to talk about how the world's worst, most mediocre men can openly crime, and the rest of us can't even walk the streets while brown and black. It's all connected.
Yeah.
Joy, you have to become a subscriber. Please subscribe to Joy's show on YouTube. Please subscribe to her on Substack. Folks, it's the Left Hook. I have no paywalls. Everything is free because I'm a terrible capitalist. First, go give your money to Joy. If you have a few bucks left over, then come to me. I have like 800 kids. But if you can't, just share this content. It'll be out on Joy's Substack and my Substack in about 30 or 45 minutes. And folks, be kind, be informed, be empathetic, and please, oh, please, don't be a fascist. Thank you, Joy.
Thank you, my friend. Bye.